"Please, mister, don't drive away." Clay Bennett heard the words before he understood they were not words at all, only the thin, trembling whimper of a puppy standing in the middle of County Road 18, with rain dripping from its ears and mud trembling on its paws. The mail truck rolled to a stop 10 feet away, its headlights cutting through the gray morning like two tired lanterns, and for a moment the whole road seemed to hold its breath. Clay sat behind the wheel, with one hand on the brake, his blue-gray eyes fixed on the little dog blocking his route as if it had been waiting for him alone. Beside him, Timber, his 6-year-old German shepherd, rose from the passenger seat with sudden focus, ears sharp, amber eyes steady, the old military harness across his chest creaking softly as he leaned toward the windshield. Clay had seen fear before. He had seen it in men, in towns after storms, in the quiet rooms of people who had lost too much. But this was different. The puppy did not run from the truck. It limped closer, placed 2 tiny paws against the step below Clay's door, and looked up with a desperate patience that made something old and sore tighten in his chest. Clay pushed the door open slowly. Cold rain swept in, carrying the smell of pine, wet gravel, and the far-off smoke of wood stoves waking across the valley. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse in early mornings. "Where'd you come from, little one?" The puppy backed away, then turned toward the trees, stumbling 3 steps before looking over its shoulder. Timber made a low sound, not a growl, not quite a whine, but the kind of warning Clay had learned never to ignore. Years ago, before mail routes and quiet roads, before he became a man who measured life by house numbers and postage stamps, Clay had trusted that dog through dust, alarms, and long silences where every sound mattered. Timber did not bark unless the world had shifted, and now he barked 3 times, short and certain. Clay felt the hairs rise along the back of his neck. The route could wait. The bills, birthday cards, church flyers, and grocery coupons stacked in canvas bins behind him could wait. Somewhere beyond the dripping tree line, something could not. He pulled his rain jacket from the hook, stepped down into the mud, and watched the puppy stagger ahead as if every ounce of its small body had been saved for this one final mission. Timber jumped down beside him, landing with the calm weight of a trained guardian, nose already working the wet air. The puppy led them past a leaning mailbox, swallowed by weeds, its red flag rusted upright like a hand that had been raised too long and forgotten. On its side, beneath streaks of rain and moss, Clay could still make out faded white letters. Whitcomb Farm. A ribbon, pale yellow and torn, clung to a blackberry bush nearby. Clay touched it with 2 fingers. The cloth was damp, but the stitching remained clear enough to read one small name: June. The puppy stopped when he saw it, gave a soft cry, and pushed deeper into the woods. Clay glanced back once at the mail truck, lonely in the rain with its hazard lights blinking, like a heartbeat on the empty road. Then he looked at Timber. The German shepherd stood perfectly still, head tilted toward the trees, listening to something Clay could not hear. In that quiet second, with rain ticking against dead leaves and the little dog waiting ahead, Clay understood that the morning had stopped being a mail route. It had become a call for help, and perhaps, though he could not yet know it, a call from the past. Clay moved carefully behind the puppy, one boot sinking into the soft shoulder of the old trail while rain whispered through the birches overhead. Timber stayed close to his left knee, silent except for the steady rhythm of his breathing. The woods behind Whitcomb Farm had the feeling of a place that had not welcomed visitors in years. Vines looped across the path like forgotten rope, and the air smelled of wet leaves, cold soil, and something faintly sweet, like apples left too long in a cellar. "Slow down, little one," Clay called. "You are going to wear yourself out." The puppy stopped, shivering so hard its ribs fluttered beneath its muddy coat, then gave one soft bark and pressed on. Clay's jaw tightened. "All right," he said under his breath. "You know where we are going." Timber suddenly stepped ahead and blocked Clay with his body. His ears lifted, and his nose pointed toward the leaning mailbox they had passed only moments before. Clay turned back. At first, he saw nothing but rain streaking over rusted metal. Then a pale corner of paper trembled inside the half-open box. "Mail in a dead box," Clay murmured. "That is strange." He reached in and pulled out a bundle of letters tied with twine, wrapped in an old plastic bread bag to keep the damp away. The top envelope was yellowed at the edges, the handwriting careful and slanted. No stamp, no postmark, just 4 words written across the front: "To the soldier who saved my boy." Clay went very still. Timber looked up at him, as if waiting for the part of the past Clay never liked to touch. "That is not for me," Clay said quietly, though his voice had lost certainty. He slipped the bundle inside his jacket to protect it from the rain. Ahead, the puppy whined. Clay followed, but now every step felt heavier. The trail opened into a sagging yard where tall grass bent under the weather, and an old white farmhouse leaned beneath a roof patched with tin. A wind chime hung from the porch, made of spoons, keys, and small pieces of blue glass. It moved, though the air had gone strangely still, giving one thin note that seemed to pass through the house rather than across it. Timber stopped at the bottom step. The puppy ran to the door, scratched twice, then looked back at Clay with bright, pleading eyes. Clay climbed the porch and knocked. The sound was dull, swallowed by the wood. "Hello," he called. "United States Mail. Is anyone inside?" No answer came. He knocked again, harder. "My name is Clay Bennett. I found your dog on the road. If you can hear me, say something." From somewhere beneath the house came a faint sound. Not a voice, not at first. Just 3 weak taps, spaced apart, deliberate and human. Timber barked once and moved to the side of the porch, nose pressed to a warped cellar door, half hidden behind a stack of firewood. Clay crouched and placed his palm against the wood. "Someone is down there," he whispered. The puppy let out a trembling cry and pushed its small body against his boot. Clay looked at Timber. "Find the opening, boy." Timber circled the porch, sniffing along the foundation, until he stopped near a rusted latch buried in mud. Clay grabbed the latch and pulled. It resisted with a long groan, then lifted just enough for cool air to breathe out from below. "Mom," Clay called into the darkness. "Can you hear me?" A fragile voice answered, thin as thread but alive. "June? Did June come back?" Clay looked down at the puppy, then swallowed hard. "Yes, Mom," he said. "June came back, and she brought help." Clay lowered himself through the cellar, opening one careful step at a time, the old wooden ladder trembling under his weight, but holding steady enough. Cold air rose from below, carrying the scent of damp stone, canned peaches, and dust that had slept too long. Timber waited at the top with June tucked close against his front legs, the little puppy whining each time Clay disappeared another foot into the dimness. "Stay with Timber, June," Clay called softly. "He knows how to keep watch." A weak laugh floated from the dark. "That dog has better manners than most people I have met." Clay reached the cellar floor and lifted his flashlight. The beam swept across shelves of mason jars, folded quilts sealed in plastic, a radio with a cracked dial, and finally an elderly woman sitting beside a stack of fallen storage boxes. She was small, wrapped in a faded blue housecoat and a gray cardigan, her white hair pinned loosely at the back of her head. One hand held a flashlight with a dying glow. The other rested on her ankle, not dramatically, just carefully, as if she did not want to trouble anyone more than necessary. "Mrs. Whitcomb?" Clay asked. Her eyes narrowed in the light, pale green and sharp despite the weariness in them. "Eleanor," she said. "Mrs. Whitcomb makes me sound like I still attend garden club meetings." Clay almost smiled. "Clay Bennett, I am going to help you out of here." Her expression changed at his name, but only for a second, like a curtain shifting in a house no one thought was occupied. "Bennett," she repeated. "That is a name I have not heard in a long time." Clay crouched beside her. "We can talk about names after we get you upstairs. Can you stand?" If Grace is optional," Clay said. "Standing is the goal." She gave another faint laugh, then winced as he helped her shift upright. Above them, Timber gave one short bark, and June answered with a tiny squeak. Eleanor looked up toward the opening, her face softening. "That little girl ran all the way to the road." "She did," Clay said. "Stop my truck, like she had been trained by the Postmaster General. She has always been stubborn." Eleanor's voice trembled. "I told her to go. I did not know if she understood." Clay looked at her then, really looked, and felt the quiet courage of that sentence settle between them. She understood enough. He guided her arm around his shoulders and moved slowly, one step at a time toward the ladder. It took patience, pauses, and Timber's steady presence above like a lighthouse in fur. Clay climbed first, then braced himself and helped Eleanor rise through the opening, while Timber stood firm beside the porch rail. When Eleanor finally reached the wet grass, June broke free from Timber and pressed against her lap, tail shaking with joy. Eleanor folded both hands around the puppy and whispered, "You brave little blessing, you did it." Clay turned away for a moment, giving them privacy, and saw the bundle of letters inside his jacket. The top envelope had slipped loose. Rain had smudged the old ink just enough to reveal another line beneath the first. "If I never find him, may God find his family." Clay's breath caught. Eleanor noticed. "You found the letters," she said quietly. Clay looked at her. Who were they for? The wind moved through the spoon and key chime above the porch, and this time its sound was clear, almost gentle. Eleanor held June close, then answered, "They were for a young soldier named Thomas Bennett. He saved my son during the flood of '79, then vanished before I could thank him." Clay stood very still in the rain. "Thomas Bennett was my father." Eleanor closed her eyes, and the tears that came were quiet ones, warmed by recognition rather than sorrow. "Then June did not bring just anyone," she whispered. She brought the right Bennett home. Clay did not speak for several seconds. Rain tapped softly on the brim of his postal cap, slipped down the collar of his jacket, and darkened the bundle of letters he held against his chest. The name Thomas Bennett seemed to hang in the air between him and Eleanor, like a church bell, still trembling after being struck. Timber stepped closer, pressing his shoulder against Clay's leg, not demanding attention, only reminding him to breathe. Eleanor noticed and gave a tired smile. That shepherd understands more than most men say out loud. Clay looked down at Timber, then back at her. He has carried me through worse weather than this. So did your father, Eleanor whispered. Clay swallowed. My father never talked much about what he did for people. Good men rarely do, she said. They just leave light behind and keep walking. June curled tighter in Eleanor's lap, her small body finally beginning to settle now that her person was safe. Clay crouched beside Eleanor on the porch step and opened the top letter with careful fingers. The paper inside was thin, folded so many times the creases had become part of it. He did not read all of it. He could not. Only a few lines caught his eyes. Your kindness saved more than one life that day. My boy grew up because you did not turn away. If I ever find your family, I want them to know the world was changed by what you did. Clay lowered the page. Her son, he said quietly. Where is he now? Eleanor looked toward the orchard behind the farmhouse, where old apple trees stood silver in the rain. Daniel lived a good life, became a school principal down in Traverse City, helped children who had no one waiting for them at home. He passed 3 years ago peaceful, surrounded by the people he loved. Clay nodded slowly, feeling the ache of a story both sad and beautiful. So my father saved him, and he spent his life helping others. Eleanor touched the puppy's damp head. That is how mercy travels, Mr. Bennett. It does not stay where it starts. From inside the farmhouse came a sudden creak, followed by the soft clatter of something falling. Timber's ears snapped forward. Clay stood at once. Stay here. Eleanor lifted one hand. Top shelf by the kitchen window. The house does that when the wind shifts. That did not sound like wind. Timber was already at the door, waiting. Clay stepped inside with him, the puppy's tiny whine following from the porch. The farmhouse smelled of lemon soap, old wood, and rain leaking somewhere through the roof. In the kitchen, a framed photograph had fallen face down from a narrow shelf. Clay picked it up and brushed dust from the glass. A young man in uniform stood beside a boy wrapped in a blanket, both smiling shyly at the camera. Clay knew the jawline before he allowed himself to know the face. His father, younger than Clay had ever seen him, stood with one hand resting on the boy's shoulder. On the back of the frame, written in Eleanor's careful hand, were the words, "The day Thomas Bennett brought Daniel back to us." Clay carried it to the porch without a word. Eleanor saw the photograph and covered her mouth. "I wondered where that went," she said. "Daniel used to keep it by the window. He said if the soldier ever came back, he wanted him to see that he grew tall." Clay tried to answer, but his voice failed him. Timber leaned against him again, steady as a fence post. Eleanor reached for Clay's hand. "Your father gave us time. I have been asking God for years how to return a gift like that." Clay shook his head. "You do not owe me anything." "No," she said gently. "I do not owe you, but gratitude is not a debt. It is a seed, and some seeds wait a long time before they bloom." Clay helped Eleanor into the kitchen, where the old farmhouse seemed to exhale around them with the tired relief of being occupied again. Rain traced slow lines down the window above the sink, blurring the orchard beyond into silver and green. Timber settled near the doorway, watchful and quiet, while June curled on a braided rug beside Eleanor's chair, as if afraid the world might take her person away again. Clay found a wool blanket folded over the back of a rocker and wrapped it around Eleanor's shoulders. "You need a doctor," he said, "and before you argue, that was not a question." Eleanor looked up at him with a spark of humor, returning to her eyes. "You deliver letters like that too?" "Just throw them at people and declare them final. Only when the address is stubborn." She laughed softly, then gave in with a nod. Clay used the wall phone near the pantry, an old beige thing with a cord stretched from years of use, and called the county emergency line. When he hung up, Eleanor was studying the letters on the table. "I used to write one every year," she said, "usually in October. That was when the flood happened." Clay sat across from her, the photograph of his father between them. "Why did you never mail them?" "I tried." Her fingers touched the twine around the bundle. "The army forwarded the first one back, no address. Then life became busy, then Daniel became sick. Then the farm became quiet. After a while, the letters were not messages anymore. They were prayers with envelopes." Clay looked toward the rain-dark window. "My father passed when I was 19. Heart gave out while fixing a fence. He never knew how many people remembered him." "Maybe he did," Eleanor said. Men like that pretend not to notice love, but they carry it anyway. A faint metallic sound drifted from the hall, soft and rhythmic. Timber raised his head. Clay turned. There it is again. Eleanor frowned. That is not the shelf. Timber stood, crossed the kitchen, and stopped before a narrow door beneath the staircase. June lifted her head and gave one tiny bark, as if agreeing with him. Clay opened the door and found a shallow closet stacked with coats, seed catalogs, and old boots. Timber pushed his nose past them and pawed at the floorboards. "What is under there?" Clay asked. Eleanor's face changed, the warmth giving way to surprise. "Nothing that I know of." Clay moved the boots aside. One floorboard sat slightly higher than the rest, its edge worn smooth by time. He slid his pocket knife beneath it and lifted carefully. Beneath the board lay a small metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Eleanor drew in a breath. Daniel's lockbox. Clay set it on the table. The latch opened with a soft click. Inside were newspaper clippings, a tarnished service pin, a folded county map, and a sealed envelope marked in Daniel's handwriting. "For the Bennett family, if they ever come." Eleanor pressed a hand to her heart. "He never told me." Clay opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter and a deed copy stamped by the county clerk. His eyes moved over the words, then stopped. "Eleanor," he said, voice low. "This says Daniel set aside the back 40 acres in the farmhouse trust years ago." She stared at him. "For whom?" Clay looked at the last line, where the ink had faded but not disappeared. "For Thomas Bennett or his living family, in gratitude for the life that made all my years possible." The kitchen fell silent except for the rain and Timber's steady breathing. Eleanor's eyes filled, but she smiled through it. "That boy," she whispered. "He planted the seed before I even knew there was soil." Clay shook his head, overwhelmed. "I cannot take this." Eleanor reached across the table, her hand fragile but firm over his. "You are not taking it, Clay. You were brought to it. There is a difference." Clay looked at the deed copy until the words began to blur, not because he did not understand them, but because he understood them too well. The farmhouse, the orchard, the back 40 acres, the weathered barn beyond the apple trees, all of it had been waiting under Daniel Whitcomb's handwriting like a door no one had opened. Outside, the county ambulance rolled into the muddy drive with quiet lights, flashing through the rain, painting the kitchen walls in soft pulses of red and white. Eleanor squeezed Clay's hand before he stood. "Do not put that paper away like it is trouble," she said. "It is not trouble. It feels too big," Clay answered. "Most blessings do when they first arrive." Two paramedics entered with kind voices and rain on their jackets. One of them, a woman named Marcy, smiled at Eleanor. "You found yourself some company, Mrs. Whitcomb." Eleanor nodded toward June, Timber, and Clay. "No, dear. They found me." While Marcy checked Eleanor's ankle and blood pressure, the other paramedic looked at Clay. "You the mailman who called it in?" "Yes, sir." "Good thing you came down this road." Clay glanced at June, who sat pressed against Eleanor's chair, refusing to move. "I had help choosing the route." Eleanor insisted on walking to the ambulance with dignity, even if Clay had to support one side and Marcy the other. Timber followed so closely that Marcy laughed. "He official medical staff?" "He outranks all of us," Clay said. Eleanor paused at the porch and looked back at the farmhouse. Rain silvered the windows. The spoon and key chime gave one bright note above the door. "Clay," she said, "would you bring the letters when you come to the clinic?" "Of course. And the photograph." "I will." She studied his face for a long moment. "Your father had your eyes, not the color, the waiting in them." Clay did not know what to say, so he only nodded. When the ambulance pulled away, the yard became quiet again, except for rain dripping from the porch roof and June's small whimper beside his boot. Clay looked down at her. "You heard her. We have errands." He returned to the kitchen, wrapped the letters, deed copy, and photograph in a dry dish towel, and tucked them safely into his mailbag. Timber stood by the staircase closet, still watching the loose board. "What is it, boy?" Clay asked. Timber pawed once more, not at the hiding place now, but beside it. Clay crouched and felt along the baseboard. His fingers found a narrow gap. Behind it was a small brass key taped to the wood, dark with age, and a tag with two words written in faded ink, North Barn. Clay turned the key over in his palm. "You think this day is done?" Timber gave a low huff, almost like an answer. June, suddenly braver, trotted to the kitchen door and looked toward the barn at the edge of the orchard. Its roof sagged gently, its red paint worn thin by decades of Michigan winters. Clay checked the clock above the stove. He still had undelivered mail in the truck, a supervisor who would want an explanation, and a life that had been simple that morning only because it had been empty. He looked at Timber. "We take the letters to Eleanor first." Timber did not move. Clay sighed. "All right, 5 minutes at the barn, then the clinic." The rain softened as they crossed the yard. The key slid into the old barn lock like it had been waiting for his hand. Inside, the air smelled of hay, cedar, and years. Sunlight, thin and pale, slipped through cracks in the boards. At the far wall hung a canvas tarp. Timber walked straight to it and sat. Clay pulled the tarp away. Behind it was not machinery, not junk, but a wooden workbench covered in carefully preserved birdhouses, school desks, and small toys, each tagged with a child's name. On the wall above them, Daniel had painted a sentence in steady blue letters. A saved life should become shelter for someone else. Clay stood there with June at his feet and Timber beside him, and for the first time all day, he let the tears come quietly, without shame, because some inheritances are not made of land at all. Some are made of proof that kindness can outlive the hands that first gave it. Clay stayed in the north barn longer than 5 minutes, though he knew Eleanor was waiting, and the mail truck still blinked on the road like a forgotten duty. He moved slowly along the workbench, reading the small tags tied to each handmade piece. Anna, age 7, Bluebird House. Marcus, age 9, writing desk. Claire, age 6, doll cradle. Each name had been burned into thin wood with careful hands, and beside each one, Daniel had written a date and a school name from towns scattered across northern Michigan. Clay touched the edge of a tiny chair, sanded smooth enough for a child's hands. He kept building, Clay said quietly. Timber sat beside him, ears relaxed now, as if the room had answered whatever question had pulled him here. June sniffed a wooden birdhouse, sneezed, then looked proud of herself. Clay gave a soft laugh through the ache in his throat. Do not start claiming inventory. Behind the bench, tucked under a canvas roll, he found a ledger. The cover was green, cracked at the corners, with Daniel Whitcomb's name written in black marker. Clay opened it and saw pages of careful entries, not money owed but gifts given. Desks repaired for classrooms, shelves built for libraries, ramps fixed for neighbors. A note near the final page read, "If the Bennett family ever comes, show them this barn. Tell them one rescued boy spent his life making small shelters wherever he could." Clay closed the ledger and pressed it against his chest. "You did good, Daniel," he whispered. "You did real good." Timber lifted his head toward the open barn door. Tires crunched in the driveway. A white county sheriff's SUV rolled in, followed by a small blue sedan. Clay stepped outside, mailbag over one shoulder, June trotting at his heel. A deputy climbed out first, a broad man in his 50s with a rain-dark hat and a cautious expression. "You Clay Bennett?" "Yes, sir. Deputy Hollis. Mrs. Whitcomb asked us to check on the property. Said there was a mailman, a heroic puppy, and a shepherd who probably deserved a badge." Clay glanced at Timber. "He has been asking for one." The deputy smiled, then grew gentler. "Clinic says she is stable. They want to keep her for observation, but she is asking for you." The woman from the blue sedan hurried forward, carrying a leather folder under her coat. She had silver-streaked brown hair, reading glasses on a chain, and the brisk kindness of someone used to delivering hard truths softly. "Mr. Bennett, I am Nora Caldwell. I handled Daniel Whitcomb's estate and Eleanor's trust documents." Clay's shoulders tensed. "I am not trying to claim anything." Nora's expression softened. "People who are trying to claim things rarely say that before hello." Deputy Hollis chuckled. Nora opened the folder and pulled out a sealed packet. Daniel updated the trust 6 years before he passed. Eleanor reaffirmed it last spring. The farmhouse, north barn, orchard, and 40 acres were to go to Thomas Bennett or his direct family, only if contact was ever made naturally. No advertising, no hunting anyone down. Daniel wrote that gratitude should never chase a person. It should wait with the porch light on. Clay looked toward the farmhouse where the windows glowed faintly under the gray sky. "I have a mail route," he said, as if that explained the storm inside him. Nora nodded. "Then you understand delivery better than anyone. Some things arrive late but still arrive." June pawed at Clay's boot, and Timber leaned against his leg with quiet certainty. Deputy Hollis looked at the puppy. That little one ran nearly a mile in the storm, according to the tire tracks and paw prints, straight to the county road. Clay looked down at June, muddy, brave, and barely bigger than his lunch pail. She knew where to go. Nora smiled. Maybe she knew who would stop. Clay turned the brass key in his palm, then looked once more at the sentence painted on the barn wall. For years, he had believed his life after the army was only a route to walk alone, house to house, mailbox to mailbox, never staying long enough for any place to remember him. But standing there with his father's photograph in his bag, Daniel's ledger in his hands, Timber at his side, and June waiting in the rain, Clay felt something quiet open in him. Not certainty. Not yet, but the first small warmth of belonging, fragile as a porch light seen through a storm. Clay reached the county clinic just after noon, carrying the old letters in his mailbag and the smell of rain still clinging to his jacket. Timber walked at his side with the calm seriousness of a visitor who understood hospitals better than Most people wished he did, while June rode in Clay's arms, wrapped in a towel Nora had found in her car. The nurse at the front desk looked up, saw the puppy, and raised one eyebrow. "I am guessing that is not standard mail." Clay glanced down at June, who blinked sleepily. "Special delivery." The nurse tried not to smile and failed. "Room 3. Mrs. Whitcomb has asked about you 4 times. Eleanor was sitting upright in bed when Clay entered, a blanket across her knees and a cup of untouched tea on the tray beside her. Her face brightened at the sight of June. "There is my brave girl." June squirmed until Clay set her gently on the bed, where she curled against Eleanor's side with a sigh so deep it seemed to empty the whole room of worry. Eleanor looked at Timber next. "And there is the officer in charge." Clay said he inspected the barn. "Of course he did." Her eyes moved to the mailbag. "And you?" Clay sat in the chair beside her bed. "I found Daniel's ledger, the toys, the desks, the birdhouses, all those names." Eleanor's lips trembled into a proud smile. "He never had children of his own, so he borrowed the whole county." Clay pulled out the photograph of Thomas Bennett and Daniel, then laid it on the blanket. Eleanor touched the glass with 2 fingers. "Daniel used to say, your father gave him the first day of the rest of his life." Clay looked down at the picture, at the young face of a father he had mostly known through silence and work boots by the door. "I wish he had told me." "Maybe he did not know how," Eleanor said. "Some men love by fixing fences, changing tires, and standing in doorways until the storm passes." Clay gave a small, aching laugh. "That sounds like him." Nora Caldwell arrived a few minutes later with Deputy Hollis, both damp from the rain and carrying the kind of careful expressions people bring when paperwork meets the heart. Nora placed a folder on the bedside table. "Eleanor, everything is confirmed. The trust is valid. Mr. Bennett is the lawful beneficiary if he chooses to accept." Clay shook his head before she finished. "I still do not know if I can." Eleanor turned toward him, not stern but clear. "Clay, do you think a home becomes less holy because someone gives it to you?" "No." "Then why treat this one like a burden?" He looked through the clinic window where rain softened the parking lot into watercolor. "Because I spent a long time learning not to need much." Deputy Hollis spoke quietly from the doorway. "Needing less is not the same as refusing good." Timber walked over and rested his chin on Clay's knee. June lifted her head from Eleanor's blanket, ears flopping unevenly, as if adding her own vote. Eleanor smiled. "Even the dogs know." Clay breathed out slowly. "What would you want me to do with it?" Eleanor's answer came without hesitation. "Live there. Keep the barn open. Let Daniel's work keep helping children. Let your father's kindness finish coming home." Nora slid a pen across the folder, but did not push it closer. Clay looked at the pen, then at the old photograph, then at Timber and June. He thought of the empty miles of his route, the truck cab that had felt like shelter, only because he had stopped hoping for more, and the farmhouse waiting behind wet apple trees with its porch light dim but still alive. Finally, he picked up the pen. "I will not take it as payment," he said. Eleanor reached for his hand. "Then take it as a promise." Clay signed his name, slow and steady. Outside, the rain began to thin, and for the first time all day, a pale line of sunlight opened over the county road, pointing west toward Whitcomb Farm. 3 weeks later, the first clear morning of spring settled over Whitcomb Farm, with a softness Clay had almost forgotten the world could offer. The apple trees behind the house wore tiny white blossoms, the grass shone with dew, and the old spoon and key wind, chime above the porch, moved in a breeze gentle enough to sound like laughter from another room. Clay stood at the mailbox on County Road 18, tightening the last screw into a fresh coat of white paint. The name on the side read Bennett Whitcomb Farm, written in steady blue letters by Eleanor herself. Timber sat beside the post, dignified and watchful, while June tumbled through the grass with a yellow ribbon tied loosely around her collar. A familiar voice called from the porch, "If you make that mailbox any straighter, the county will put it in a museum." Clay looked back and smiled. Eleanor sat in a rocker with a blanket over her knees, healing well, her cane resting beside her like an old friend finally allowed to rest. "Mailboxes deserve respect," Clay said. "They carry important things. So do stubborn men," she replied. Nora Caldwell arrived shortly after with Deputy Hollis and 2 teachers from the elementary school, their truck bed filled with worn classroom chairs waiting for repair. Clay opened the north barn doors, and sunlight poured across Daniel's workbench, touching the unfinished birdhouses, the small desks, and the painted words on the wall. One of the teachers, a young man named Mr. Avery, removed his cap. "Mrs. Whitcomb said Daniel used to fix things for children who needed a little help." Clay ran a hand over the smooth edge of a desk. "He still does." Deputy Hollis looked at the sign Clay had hung above the barn entrance, the Daniel Whitcomb Shelter Workshop. "That was a good choice. Eleanor chose it," Clay said. From the porch, Eleanor called, "Do not blame me for your good handwriting." Everyone laughed, even Clay, whose laughter came easier now, not loud but real. Later that afternoon, after the chairs were unloaded, and June had convinced every visitor to scratch her ears, Clay carried his father's photograph into the farmhouse. He hung it in the front room beside Daniel's ledger, and the first letter Eleanor had ever written. Timber watched from the rug near the fireplace, his amber eyes calm in the golden light. June curled against his side, too tired from being brave and adored to keep her eyes open. Eleanor stood beside Clay, leaning on her cane. "Your father would have liked this room," she said. Clay studied the young soldier in the photograph, one hand on Daniel's shoulder, both of them smiling into a future neither could see. "I think he would have liked knowing the story kept going." Eleanor nodded. Stories do that when someone is kind enough to carry them. As evening came, Clay walked his final mail route back to the farmhouse, not because he had to, but because he liked the way the road looked when it led home. He placed one envelope in his own mailbox, addressed in his own handwriting to Thomas Bennett, wherever grace keeps good men. Inside was a single page that read, "Dad, I found out what you did. I found the people you helped. I found the home your kindness left behind. I hope you know I am staying." Clay raised the red flag, then stood a moment in the quiet. Timber pressed against his leg. June barked once from the porch, small and proud, as if announcing that dinner, family, and the rest of life were waiting. Clay looked at the farmhouse glowing under the pink Michigan sky and whispered, "I am coming." For years, he had believed miracles arrived like thunder, shaking the ground and demanding belief. But this one had come softly, on 4 small paws in the rain, leading him not to a reward, but to a place where every lost piece of his heart could finally set down its weight. Sometimes kindness does not return loudly. Sometimes it waits by an old road, wearing mud on its paws, until the right person remembers how to stop. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with friends who might enjoy it too. We would love to know where you are watching from. Tell us your city and country in the comments. More heartfelt and unforgettable hero dog stories are already waiting for you. See you in the next one.